Professor Naminata Diabate, my good friend, thank you very much for meeting with me. And congratulations on your continued successes, and I really wish you many more. If I picked you up from the airport and I saw you holding a copy of this book, what would you tell me about it if I asked you, tell me about this book? What would be your response?
Thank you, Professor Wachanga. You are a good friend, and I'm very honored that you invited me to be part of this lineup. I mean, you were a pioneer in what you're doing, and I'm very, very grateful. That's a fantastic question, because although this book was written with an academic audience in mind, I think it deserves to also be accessible to the average person. So if a cab driver were to pick me from Abidjan and ask me what this is about, I will say naked agency is about what we typically call genital cursing. That is conventionally understood as mature women's act of disrobing to curse the targets. And those targets can be military and police officers, can be men in power, can be their sons, can be their husbands, and it can be any person that is identified as male. So this book is about when women strip naked in anger in order to punish and to curse men. So that is really the object, the gesture that the book is analyzing. And he analyzes that gesture by looking at newspaper reports, by looking at documentary films, novels, and other visual art. So those are the materials that I work with in order to make an argument about this book. So the idea is, when a woman or a group of women, let's say in Abidjan, in Nairobi, strip naked, either they're walking naked or they're lifting their skirts and their wrappers to show their genitalia to men, and we have a series of people around them who are taking pictures of the women's bodies and posting those pictures to various websites and social media social media sites. What does that gesture of posting these pictures do to the women and to the images and to their families? So that's what I'm trying to understand, because this gesture is integral to every society. Any society where clothing is required on a day-to-day basis, any society where to be in the public realm, you have to wear something, disrobing has always been mobilized. It's always a gesture of resistance against, power abuse. But when this happens in an era where digital media and social media platforms are available, where people have the ability to capture women's bodies and their nakedness and circulate them, what happens to those women? What happens to their images? What happens to their families who may come across these images on social media sites? So these are the difficulties that the book is trying to highlight. And most scholars who have talked about this have mainly considered the women as powerful, and they have stopped there. That these women are powerful, they can resist military men, and they can resist police officers, and they stop their analysis there. But I'm taking the conversation further to think about the impact of social media and the impact of people who can take pictures of these women and distribute them. And so that's what the book is about. And it really covers a large portion of the continent. In the book, I talk about at least 35 different countries on the continent where this disrobing has happened. So it's not a phenomenon that is limited to a country. It is really worldwide, but it takes place a lot more on the continent because of the challenges that people are going through on a daily basis. The ways in which people participate in electoral processes, they participate in voting, but they still are not getting the results of all their political engagements. So people feel like the thing that they have left, the only weapon that they have left is to strip naked. So it's both an act of desperation, but it's also an act of power. Because once somebody strips naked, they have nothing else to lose. At that moment, when a woman like of our mother's age in the 70s and 80s decides to stop in front of a police officer, let's imagine if they are demonstrating against the high cost of living. These women are having a hard time making ends meet. Their children are not able to go to school. They cannot even have a decent meal on a daily basis because of the cost of living. So they decide to protest. So they say, we're going to go on today to the president's, office. So they're really desperate. And then you have a line of security men and police officers trying to stop them. And they say, no, we need to talk to the president today because this is not going to work. And the police officers and the security forces try to push them away. And the women will start stripping naked. What they say in that moment, I don't care about anything else. I don't care about my identity as a woman. I don't care about my identity as a wife. I don't care about my identity as a woman who sells vegetables. I'm just caring about my survival. And if I need to get rid of all of those aspects of my life and strip naked and show you what I am, then the price is worth it. So it's that moment of desperation. That's also that moment of power. So that's what I'm trying to tell people in this book.
Naminata, take me through the beginning of this idea, the conception of the idea. Where did this idea germinate from? What drove you to think about it? In other words, take me through the biography of this project, the conception of the idea, how you conducted your research, the writing process, the publication, the reception of the book. Take me through that process.
I would say it was with me my whole life, but it wasn't in the form of a book. It was with me in form of a way of living. Well, what do I mean by that? I am Malinki from Côte d'Ivoire, and I grew up in a neighborhood with various other ethnic groups from Côte d'Ivoire and various other nationalities in my neighborhood. But in that neighborhood, there was this shared understanding that a mother's nakedness was a sight that nobody wanted to see. And it's a sight that nobody should see. That seeing the nakedness of your mother, especially if she is angry, and especially if she does it deliberately, is the worst abomination that can happen to anybody. So whatever else you're doing in life, that's that one thing that you should avoid at all costs. So it's that way of living that was ingrained in all of us in our neighborhood, independently of our national and ethnic affiliations. So I go to the US from Côte d'Ivoire for graduate school, and I'm taking all these courses in women's and gender studies. And all I'm coming across are texts and movies that are telling us, oh, African women are headless human beings. They are beast of burdens. They are oppressed. They are repressed. They are subjugated. Every possible adjective that designates somebody who doesn't have any power. Those were the adjectives that I came across being used to identify African women. But that was not my experience. My experience in my neighborhood was that mothers were powerful human beings. Probably, I think we can define power in multiple ways, but they were not helpless women. There were no women that you could just slap and just get it with it. No. So I was trying to make sense of, oh, how was it that I was reading about African women? These were the images that were coming to me. It didn't fit into the logic and the way I had been living. That's what I said, that the book it was not in the form of a book, but it was in the form of living and the principle that one lives by. So I said, okay, I need to show the world that there was another way by which African women wield power. It is not absolute power, but they wield some kind of power. And I'm going to share with the world what I know about that. So I go to my dissertation director and I said, I want to work on this because I'm really dissatisfied with what I'm seeing in my courses. There are other images of African women that we're not seeing that I need to share with the world. And then she said, show me the book. Because with comparative literature, we work with books. We don't work with ideas. Oh, I know this from my neighborhood. Show me the books. And I said, I don't have any books. So she said, so it's not a dissertation topic because you are not in sociology. You're not in anthropology. You are a literary and film critic. So if you don't have books and films to show me that this phenomenon, this strategy exists, I don't think you can write your dissertation on it. So I went out there. At that time, the HNet listservs were very popular. So I went out there and sent out probably emails to at least 10 of those HNet lists, HNet Women, HNet Africa, West Africa, East Africa, you name it, asking if there were novels or films and plays or poems where people could see, this form of protest and resistance. And I kind of think of only one novel at the time. And I started working with that. And eventually I found other novels. So I ended up writing a dissertation on this Nigerian author called Obinikaran Echewa. He wrote this novel called I Saw the Sky Catch Fire. It came out in 1992 in the United States. And I found this other short story by this American anthropologist about women in Rwanda. And so I didn't have many sources. So I needed to open up the dissertation and make it also about queerness, queer texts. So the dissertation ended up being on one novel, at least about genital cursing. So it's a later on when I started my career as an assistant professor that I was able to get more novels and films. And one of those novels is Wachanga Wizard of the Prof. So that's one of those novels as well. And that's so funny because Ngungi was at Cornell to give a talk. And I was just sitting next to him over dinner. And we were exchanging, and he started asking me, what are you working on? And I say, I'm working on what is known in anthropology as genital cursing. And I explained to him, and I said, but it's been frustrating because now that I'm done with the dissertation, I want to make the book just on this, but I'm just not finding it. And I said, oh, did you look at my novel? I said, which one? He said, Wizard of the Prof. So as you can imagine, the following right after dinner, I was on Amazon ordering it. So that's how that came about. I have to tell you, I'm very surprised by the success of whatever it is that, enthusiasm that the book has received. I don't even know if I should call it a success, but I'm very surprised by the journey, because all of the publishers that I approached with this book, seriously, many didn't want it. Many did not want this book. The terms that they were coming with is too ambitious. Because how do you want to talk about this gesture across the whole continent? Too ambitious. I remember I will go to the office because I was using my professional email to send out those book proposals. So I will get the response from the presses in my office email. So I will go to campus over one summer and collect letters of rejection. I would collect rejection letters. All the major publishers you can imagine, they say no. It's too ambitious. It's not part of our publishing pathline or vision. We're not working on these questions now. It's outside of what we are interested in. So that's how it was. So I never knew it was going to be a book. So, but one day I just went to an MLA conference in Texas, and I met Keto Whistler, and I told him about it and said, we want to see it. So, but nobody else wanted it. Actually, I had sent it the proposal to Duke, and they said no. So yes, so that's the surprise, that people find it useful. But it was a painful book to write. I don't know if I should get into that now, because it was very painful. Because we're talking about context in which people are reaching. Let's take, for example, the fees must fall protesting in South Africa. Some female students use this gesture really out of desperation. They are protesting one day on campus, and it was very, very challenging for both the students and the law enforcement. We were trying to crowd control. And at some point, there were tear gas, rubber bullets being shot around. And some of these female students said, you know what? They were just as well killed. So I'm just going to strip naked. Instead of sending rubber bullets and tear gas and water, just kill me. So that's how some of them ended up stripping naked in that moment. So, and this is across the continent. Like the number of events that I was able to collect for the book, I probably collected about 200. And these are desperate and politically divisive contexts. So people are not just playing around stripping naked for the fun of it. They are doing this in moments of desperation. So how do you write and analyze and look closely at this novel, this news report, without being emotionally drained? Like, for example, there was this chapter on Cote d'Ivoire, Abidjan. That was after the presidential elections of 2011, when there was a power struggle between the incumbent and a major opposition leader. And for 3 or 6 months, I would say 6 months, the country was in the standstill. No electricity, no water in some neighborhoods, no food supply. People were desperate. So some women decided, today we're going to put an end to this standstill. And they started demonstrating. And some said that some of them stripped naked to curse. So the women are saying to the journalists, we interviewed them, no, we were trying to curse them. And for them to see their mother's genitalia, it's a curse, and they may die. And the White House said, no, these were peaceful women, unarmed women. They are not armed from the women's own perspective. So I had to rewrite that chapter multiple times in order to reach that level of what you call academic objectivity. Because the emotions were, when I saw the video, literally I broke down, and I've never been able to watch the video again. It's available on YouTube. March, I think 2011. if I'm not mistaken, Ivorian women. So there were many events, chapters that I just had to rewrite. So it was an absolutely draining book to write. It was painful.
What do you hope people will take out of this?
What I will hope for all of us to take these strategies very seriously. In Accra, for example, when women from Liberia, those who fled the war in Liberia, ended up in refugee camps in Ghana. And they were asked, after quote unquote, Liberia had achieved peace, they were asked to return to Liberia. I think the UNHCR had promised them $100 for them to resettle in the country. And the women and the population of the refugee camp said, no, 100 is too paltry for us to restart a life after we have been away from our country for years. So there were negotiations between Ghana, the host country, representative of the UNHCR, which is a refugee agency of the UN, and they didn't reach a compromise. So the women started protesting. Before it was the men who were protesting, but easily they were couched in the language of insurrection. There were rebels, there were troublemakers, they were threatening Ghana's security and stability, so they were easily shut down in a refugee camp. So how much agency do you have in a refugee camp? Because, quote unquote, you are a stateless human being to start with. So the protests, they have their banners saying, we want 1,000 instead of 100. And one day, this is what the Ghanaian government decided to do. At 4 a.m., security and military forces descended on one refugee camp and rounded up, because the women and their children were sleeping in a soccer field as part of the protest for days. They did not want to move. So at 4 a.m., the security and armed forces descended on the refugee camp and rounded up all of the women who were protesting, who were sleeping, and put them, said they threatened to deport some of them to Liberia, and they threatened to incarcerate some of them. The Ghanaian Ministry of Security came out and held a press conference saying that they're going to deport and incarcerate some of the women because they're stripped naked. And their stripping naked is dangerous for Ghana. So that was the argument. Not that women held signs, that they protested for days, but the argument to deport some of them was that they stripped naked. If they had not stripped naked, because that is still up for, the jury's still out, whether the women stripped, because some women say they did not. The state said they did. So if in fact they stripped naked, that's what allowed their voices to be heard. That's what allowed their grievances for the world to know about. Because they had been protesting for days. Nobody knew about it until there were accusations of using genital cursing. So there are moments of power for the women. Because when you reach a point where your back is against the wall and you have nowhere else to go, some people resort to this. That's the last thing that they have at their disposal. And we have to take these things seriously. So if I were to be a bystander, I should think twice whether I should take the picture of these women and post it online, and for one purpose. What am I trying to achieve? Should I take pictures? And if I do, should I post them? And if I do, for what purpose? Am I trying to educate the world about the plight of these women so that quote unquote the international community can know about their grievances and quote unquote put pressure? Or am I posting this so that we get benefits from this women's strategy? or I'm not posting it just for fun, just to tell people that I was there. So I really want all of us to be very serious and conscious about what we're doing when we find ourselves as bystanders, as witnesses, or even as participants. I really want us to be serious. I think it was last August, there was a protest in Kaduna State, Nigeria, where you have sometimes Boko Haram incursions. And I talk about this in the book. One governor said that this is a killing field, that the region had become a killing field. Because some of these incursions will result in dozens of people dying. And so, anyway, so one time the women just stripped naked. We are dead every day. Our family members are dying every day. So they're stripped naked. And the instant that happened, the pictures were on Twitter. And somebody linked me. Oh, there is a book by this person. But I just could not retweet these images. And even one happened 2 weeks ago from Nigeria as well. They linked me on Twitter. But it said this person wrote this book, but I could not retweet. Because by retweeting it, I'm doing some kind of violence to the women who stripped naked in the first place. Because probably they did not intend the images to land on Twitter. They were probably targeting the local authorities.
From your own experience and from your own research, when these images are captured by bystanders, they find themselves on the web, I'm wondering, what do they become? What do those images, what do those videos, once they're tweeted, they're on Facebook, or they are on other social media platforms, what do they become? And maybe the second question, which can be tied to that, is what do you think would be the best way to deal with the convergence of this protest and the ubiquitous nature of these recording devices?
Once a picture is taken or an event and that is recorded, it lives forever, ideally. At some point, it may become irrelevant, but ideally, it should be for a lifetime, at least for as long as the person lives. So your image, you protest somewhere in, let's say, Lumumbashi, and somebody takes your picture and posts it online. And probably your name, at least the city or the locality or the town where the protest took place, is tagged. Once you strip naked and is captured, the image is out of your hands. It is beyond your control. Whatever that happens to that image is beyond your control. It can be used for empowering purposes, because it can allow people to rally against that which you are resisting, but it can also be used for salacious purposes, especially for African women, because we know for centuries, images of African women's nakedness have been around, at least in the racist colonialist literature. So women from other contexts can strip naked. The nakedness and images of the nakedness may not carry the same weight as that of African women because of the long history, centuries of epistemic violence, looking at the images. Once the image is captured, it's out of your hand. It's beyond your control. And any uses, including misuses, can be brought to bear on your image. It's in the world. And like any work of art, is subject to interpretation and misinterpretation and misuses and instrumentalizations of all kinds. So the book is also trying to tell, the general public, let's be careful when we decide to strip naked. Let's be careful, especially with the presence of recording devices and the speed at which images can travel. Because once it's on the internet, it's there. There is nothing you can do about it. Of course, you can spend, thousands of dollars to try to clean the internet, but it's really out there. And let's think twice. Now, how do we reconcile the need to strip naked? Because that's the last resort. That's your last resort. And the ubiquity of recording devices. How do we reconcile those two? I have to say, I don't have a good answer. It is not a politically satisfying answer that I have, because I wish I can say, yes, if your circumstances demand that you strip naked, yes, do that. But there is no guarantee. I think what I would say is just be mindful that your images can be used in all kinds of ways beyond your control. But I wish I had a politically satisfying question, because as I was telling you, I taped a podcast with this poster called Unladylike, and there are celebratory accounts of naked protests. Typically, people celebrate it. But I was inviting my guest, who was also the mouthpiece of some of the listeners, to say, let's be more careful, because the images are going to be beyond our control. Know that your grandchildren, centuries from now, may come across. What would you feel? So let's be a little bit more careful.
What surprised you when you are done writing this book? What are some of the surprises that you encountered?
Okay. I'm trying to tell us, let's be careful. If you plan one day, or if you find in a situation that would demand that you strip naked, think twice. If you're a witness or a bystander, think twice. Because there are implications for what you do, implications for yourself, and implications for the larger public, and even, the implications for your descendants. But most often when I give talks, I have the feeling that people are hearing me to say that protesters should not strip naked, and that there is power, that there are spiritual consequences for people who are exposed to women's genitalia. So I feel that some people are trying to convince me that naked protest is powerful, and we should not discourage people from deploying it. So that misreading is surprising to me, because I thought that I was telling us to be more cautious, that we shouldn't celebrate it, we shouldn't dismiss it, we shouldn't use it, every drop of a penny, that we should be a little bit more careful, and we should take this as a serious, work of political speech, of word making, and we cannot just strip naked every second, because the gesture will lose its potency. It will lose its potency. Can you imagine every day I'll have to wake up in Abidjan and see a group that's naked? The gesture will lose its potency. So let's be a little bit more thoughtful about different strategies of word making that we have. That's one thing. And the second thing is the surprise. Like I said, many American publishers were not interested. Of all the American publishers, university publishers that I reached out to, they were not interested. And they said, ambitious, no, that's not something we work on. So I'm really surprised that Ken Wissoker, took a chance on me. And I'm surprised that, the book is, being welcomed. Yeah, and people are typically saying, oh, I had not thought about it this way. I had not thought about it that way. And I think that's the most satisfying somebody who writes something can hear, getting people to think differently.
I also want to be very respectful of your time, but I would want to ask you before we wrap this up, what else would you want to share with me about this amazing project that I have not asked you?
I probably should share this. I decided not to have any pictures of naked women in the book. And some people found that surprising because a book that is about women's nakedness and not have a single picture of naked women was for some people counterintuitive. But I still feel proud for not going that route. Because as an African woman who lives in the United States, whose body is already overdetermined, for me to be perpetuating and circulating and disseminating images of African women that have come under so much violence over centuries was counterintuitive for, for what I stand for. So you will not find you have screen captures and some of the pictures, like for example, the fees must fall, you have blurred, but that is different from other books that talk about naked protest in other contexts where you have actual photos. So I still stand by that. I'm glad that I'm not including any pictures. And like I say, when people tag me on Twitter with images of nakedness, I just don't retweet it. I just don't retweet it. I don't want to participate, although that would probably elevate the profile of the book, but I just don't want to participate in that. So I have to say I was very careful. Just I talked about the pain of writing it. I also feel the pain of the women, because some of these women don't have their voice out there. I, as a literary and film critic, sometimes speak for them, and there's danger in that. So I have to be very careful. And probably it's that, care that many publishers in the United States didn't want to deal with. Because probably they don't want to be accused of perpetuating violent images of women because this is about naked protest. Probably, I don't know, I'm just speculating. So yes, but something that this book would have done for me was to be careful about my work as a film and literary critic, and how some questions that may seem frivolous are actually matters of life and death for some people.
Naminata, very well done. Very, very well done. Thank you very much.